June 26, 1944. Hollandia Air Base, Dutch New Guinea. The half-played game of checkers remained on the table as Lieutenant Colonel Charles MacDonald raised his eyes from the board. The individual at his screen door had just stated his name, though MacDonald didn't immediately recognize it. At that moment, MacDonald's attention was fixed on his opponent, Lieutenant Colonel Merrill Smith, who was the operations officer for Satan's Angels. The civilian gave his name again, this time with a calm assurance that caused MacDonald to stop and listen. Charles Lindbergh, the same Charles Lindbergh, who was the most renowned aviator in the United States, now stood in a temporary recreation building thousands of miles away from home, seeking authorization to talk about P-38 combat tactics. Neither he nor MacDonald realized at that instant that this seemingly small disruption would alter the nature of long-range fighter missions in the Pacific theater. In the following 6 weeks, the procedures Lindbergh demonstrated would increase the Lockheed P-38 Lightning's operational range by almost 400 miles, making what was previously deemed unattainable a normalized practice. The account of how a civilian advisor effectively doubled the range of America's leading twin-engine fighter goes beyond technicalities. It is also a story about overcoming institutional hesitation through undeniable proof, of aviators coming to rely on calculations over gut feeling, and of a single expert's knowledge of fuel conservation changing the direction of aerial combat in the Pacific. On June 26, he traveled to Hollandia and entered the room where Lieutenant Colonel MacDonald was engaged in a game of checkers. MacDonald, who was 29 years old at the time, had already achieved ace status with 10 victories. He led the 475th Fighter Group, an organization established in Australia on May 14, 1943, which had since risen to prominence as one of the highest-scoring P-38 units in the area. The group consisted of 3 squadrons, the 431st, 432nd, and 433rd, all of which operated the newest P-38J variants, featuring enhanced intercoolers and greater fuel capacity. These Lightning fighters held the record for longest range among all fighter aircraft in the Pacific, capable of flights no other type could attempt. Nevertheless, even equipped with drop tanks, the P-38's combat range remained constrained. Flights to faraway targets often left very little fuel for air combat maneuvers, causing pilots to frequently land at base with dangerously low reserves. A number of planes had gone down when paths altered by weather conditions stretched past their fuel limits. MacDonald at first courteously brushed off Lindbergh, turning his focus back to the checkers board. When Lindbergh explained that he had been sent by General Hutchinson, the 3rd Air Task Force commander, to confer about P-38 operations in combat, MacDonald became attentive. After a short exchange, MacDonald inquired whether Lindbergh was interested in participating in the next day's mission. Lindbergh consented. The operation was scheduled to begin at sunrise. Instead of returning to headquarters, MacDonald recommended that Lindbergh remain at the 475th's encampment to avoid transportation complications. As Lindbergh lay down on the extra cot, the news rapidly circulated throughout the unit. Charles Lindbergh would be joining Satan's Angels on their next mission. In the early hours of June 27, 1944, Lindbergh got ready to undertake his initial combat mission in a P-38. The weather was unfavorable, with continuous rain falling at 0530 hours. By 10:30, once the group eventually took off, the weather had gotten better. MacDonald led a group of 4 planes toward Jeffman Island and Smart Airfield, which were frequent objectives for the 475th. Lindbergh took the position of Blue 3, flying off McGuire's wing. Merrill Smith, who had already accumulated 8 victories as an ace, piloted the remaining aircraft. MacDonald observed Lindbergh skillfully fall into precise formation off of McGuire's wing. Given that he had only learned to fly the P-38 just a few days before, his ability to maintain proper formation was impeccable. The operation consisted of attacking an enemy barge located in Kaibos Bay. Lindbergh maneuvered through enemy anti-aircraft fire, using his cannons and machine guns to sweep the target. The mission achieved its objectives and all 4 planes made it back unscathed. However, What the crew chiefs observed after their return would become even more significant than the actual combat encounter. When the maintenance team inspected Lindbergh's P-38 following several sorties, they began to notice something repeating. His aircraft repeatedly came back with a significantly higher amount of fuel compared to other pilots flying the same sorties. After a 6.5-hour armed reconnaissance operation on July 1 over enemy airfields on the western edge of Gilbink Bay, Lindbergh landed with 210 gallons of fuel still in his tanks. Other flyers on that same mission came back with their fuel gauges reading nearly empty. The concluding figures reveal the narrative. The 475th Fighter Group, which flew solely P-38s, secured 551 enemy kills in the air, becoming the leading P-38 group of the conflict. Major Thomas McGuire, the United States' second highest scoring ace with 38 kills, piloted P-38s within the 475th. The P-38's a blend of long-range, powerful armaments, and dependability established it as the premier fighter in the area, and the increased range gained from Lindbergh's techniques improved every element of P-38 missions. Operations could extend further, engage for longer durations, and return more securely. The overall effect across many thousands of missions and hundreds of thousands of flying hours was incalculable yet genuine. The account also brings to light the occasionally uneasy dynamic between specialized knowledge and bureaucratic organizations. Because of Lindbergh's political stances before the war, he was not accepted for official military duty. President Roosevelt's personal dislike stopped Lindbergh from joining the armed forces in uniform. Nevertheless, the Army Air Force required exactly the skills that Lindbergh could offer. The answer was for Lindbergh to serve as a civilian without official status, having informal permission to fly in combat, which was outside the norm and would probably be against current rules. Yet this approach succeeded. Bureaucratic stiffness yielded to practical necessity in operations. This arrangement had an exceptional effect on the outcome of the war. The aviators who flew alongside Lindbergh in 1944 always remembered the lessons he imparted. During interviews many years down the line, former pilots from the 475th recounted with esteem the civilian who flew as one of their own and showed them how to go farther than they believed they could.